So with the first question, the person asks, if it's true that, in quotes, with our thoughts we make the world, end quote, then if I release the idea that it takes decades of singularly focused meditation to reach enlightenment, will that actually make it easier to do so? This is a great question. This has to do with the attitude towards practice and enlightenment. The short answer, yes and no. It will feel easier, but it will still take a lot of hard work. So for the long answer to the question, I'd like to first recite the section of the Dhammapada that I believe the questioner is taking a quote from. Mind is the origin of things. Mind is the chief and the driver. If within the mind there is unwholesome thinking, followed by speaking or acting, evil and suffering naturally follow. As a wagon or as a wagon wheel rolls within the wheel rut. Mind is the origin of things. Mind is the chief and the driver. If within the mind there is wholesome thinking, followed by speaking and acting, blessings and happiness naturally follow, as a shadow follows form. So those two brief paragraphs of the Dhammapada very simply explain that there's a cause and effect relationship between our mind, our behavior, and the condition we experience based on that behavior. If our mind, our behavior is unwholesome, we experience suffering. If our mind and our behavior is wholesome, based on that, we experience joy. I think there's also a deeper way to understand this, which is if our mind doesn't create any suffering, then we're liberated. Or if our mind doesn't create any thinking or thoughts or behavior, speaking or action that's based on attachment, then we're free. Attachment referring to clinging on to ideas, about ourself and about the things we want or the things we don't want. When we don't cling, we're free. When we cling, we are bound. So I just like to ask the person who asked the question, are you waiting for enlightenment? As you're practicing, are you seeking or waiting for enlightenment by saying that, enlightenment only happens after decades of practice? Which makes sense. There's a logic to that, right? Enlightenment or insight doesn't happen without a cause. And part of that cause is likely and often many years of diligent practice in meditation, but not only meditation, years of diligent practice training our mind to be wholesome. So that training can be through meditation, but that training can be in daily life. We encounter people and situations. What kind of mind or what kind of thoughts are we generating? What kind of speech and behavior are we enacting? Are we creating thoughts and behavior that's wholesome, or is it unwholesome? Buddhist training, in a nutshell, as it said, is to generate wholesomeness, to stop unwholesomeness, and to purify the mind. So if we want enlightenment, if we want insight, it takes training, it takes practice. What's interesting, though, is that there's no definite length of time that it takes for someone to experience enlightenment. There's no definite or fixed set time, where there's no definite, fixed, set method. And actually, enlightenment isn't created by practice, it's not created by training. It's not that we generate a lot of wholesome thinking or generate a lot of wholesome behavior, and then after some time, we accumulate an enlightened mind, or our mind becomes full of wholesomeness to the point that it's now enlightened. Enlightenment is not something that's created, or it's said nirvana is not something that's created. It's it's unconditioned. It's not something that's made. So it's not made. 无作 in Chinese. So if enlightenment is not made by practice, then actually it strictly speaking doesn't require practice to gain enlightenment. But in reality, if we don't practice, then it's not likely that we will experience enlightenment. And if we're seeking and waiting for enlightenment, well, if we follow the logic of the Dharmapada, that first paragraph, if we're seeking and waiting for enlightenment, it's basically generating unwholesome thoughts or thinking, "Ah, I have to keep meditating. How many years is this going to take? How long we've been sitting here tonight? Or every week I come sitting every week, I'm very diligent. When is this going to happen? When am I going to get enlightened?" Thinking in that way is creating unhappiness. This impatient thinking creates unhappiness or is followed by unhappiness, like the wagon of a wheel just naturally kind of falls into the rut of the wheel. So if you could imagine a wagon cart, back in the day, people rode in wagon carts, and in the road, you'd have ruts. You'd have places where the dirt was crushed by the wheel. So you've had a rut, and the wagon naturally follows it. You folks live up in Binghamton. I'm sure some of you ride quads or, mountain bike. So when you're biking or riding the quad on the trail, the wheel naturally falls into the rut, right? The trail has these two big ruts in it from the quads just going over the same path again and again. So if we often have this impatient mind, this mind that's waiting for enlightenment, we can get stuck in that rut of thinking. And actually, we don't get closer to enlightenment. We just get stuck. We're obstructed. We don't actually get further either, but with that kind of thinking, we won't be free. We'll be bound. But it's important to also explain or understand what is enlightenment. And in the Chan and Zen traditions, the term that's often used for enlightenment is seeing the nature or 见性. I think the Japanese is kensho. What is that enlightenment? Is that uh, we call moment of insight, moment of seeing the nature? What is that? What nature do we see? We see the nature of emptiness. According to Buddhist theory, seeing the nature or seeing our Buddha nature is actually awakening to the fact of emptiness, the fact that our very body, mind, and the whole world is without any permanent or separate self anywhere. So, this very person who is sitting here speaking and the person who is there meditating or listening, there's no self inside or outside that's somehow unchanging, always the same. Although it may feel like I am the one here now, I am the one sitting today, I was the same person who came here last week to sit, and next week I'll come back to sit. It feels that there's something consistent. It feels like there's someone the same coming back each time to sit. But the Buddha had an insight, and he realized that there is no permanent self there. That's the meaning of emptiness, that this body, this mind is empty of any permanent being. And everything else in the world and in the universe is the same. Seeing the nature is seeing the nature of emptiness. Seeing our Buddha nature is waking up to our nature of being empty of self, empty of any permanence. Does this kind of enlightenment equal Buddhahood? And it's interesting, in the Chan and Zen traditions, sometimes it's said that when a person sees the nature, they realize Buddhahood. 见性成佛. There's a common saying of if we drop the butcher's knife, at that moment we can see our nature and realize Buddhahood. Meaning that even someone who's doing something like killing living beings, a butcher's job is to kill living beings. Well, maybe modern butchers aren't the ones who are doing the killing. The butchers may be just cutting up the meat, but someone is. Whoever that person is that's using a knife to kill living beings, from the Buddhist perspective, killing is unwholesome. It's creating suffering for living beings. And if we're killing out of craving, killing just for the taste of the meat, that's also suffering. We're creating craving in our minds and acting out on it. If we were to put the knife down, if we were to stop, and this is not only a physical act, but the mental act, if we put down our craving, if we put down all of our mental behavior that's creating suffering, in that moment we see the nature. We let go of craving, we let go of the object of craving, and we also let go of the subject of craving, which is ourself. And in that moment, we can see the nature and realize Buddhahood. But does that mean we're a fully realized Buddha? Actually, no. That saying just means that in that moment of letting go of craving, letting go of aversion, letting go of any kind of attachment to self or to other, we see in that moment what the Buddha sees, or we experience in that moment what the Buddha experienced. A moment later, that experience could be gone, and our mind continues to cling to ourself, and maybe we cling to the idea of, whoa, that was it. I just had an enlightenment experience. I just had an amazing experience in meditation. Let me tell you about it. That's immediately then clinging to myself and my experience, even if it's an experience of insight. A person can still cling to that and think of themselves as better and become arrogant and actually become an arrogant Zen practitioner, which is sometimes referred to as the stink of Zen. When a person does begin to have experiences where their mind is very calm, very stable, very clear, and maybe experience enlightenment, but it's really not very common. It's not as common as some people in Zen circles think. Oftentimes, a person just has an experience which is more accurately described as unification, where there's no more scattered or distracting thoughts. The mind is just very clear, very calm. But there's still an attachment to myself feeling calm. There's still a subtle kind of thinking or a subtle, constant movement in the mind, which is uh, attachment or bondage. So, a moment of insight, a moment of seeing the nature, is not Buddhahood. It's not a complete Buddhahood, someone who is thoroughly and completely freed from all suffering, all attachment, and all subtle forms of ignorance and lacking awareness. But in the Chan tradition, Chan and Zen doesn't emphasize stages. It just talks about either confusion or enlightenment. Two stages. When we're unaware, we're attached, we're waiting for enlightenment, we're confused. If we're fully aware, we're just here, we're just sitting, we're just doing what we're doing without any thought of self, fixation to ourself. That's awakening. That's enlightenment. However, according to the foundational teachings of Buddhism in the Agamas and Nikayas, there are stages. There are stages from an initial experience of enlightenment, which is called stream entry, to an experience of liberation, ongoing enlightenment, thorough awakening, where there's no more self-centeredness. In the Mahayana teachings, it's said, though, that an arhat has not completed their practice. There are 52 stages of a bodhisattva, or being set on complete enlightenment, set on Buddhahood, full awakening for themselves and helping others. In the Mahayana tradition, there's 52 stages. And in one format, it's called the 10 grounds of a bodhisattva. Sometimes the first ground refers to arhatship, and there are still 9 more grounds after that, or 9 more stages. And according to some traditions, they would say that the 8th stage is an arhat, liberated being. Buddhahood, it's said to take eons, an incalculable amount of time. So this requires that a person consider that this life is only one of many. Buddhahood is something which takes not only one lifetime, but many. And whether or not you subscribe to that, that's fine. You don't have to. But the idea of enlightenment needs to be clarified. It could be a moment of insight into the empty nature of things, or self, or it could be an ongoing, complete, and thorough awakening into the empty nature of everything. Yet, even though things are empty, it's not denying life. It's actually life affirming. Because of emptiness, life is full of change, dynamic change and interchange. And a Buddha is someone who lives within that world, also dynamically responding to the needs of others and helping people live a fulfilling life with less suffering. So why am I saying all this? It's because it's important to have a realistic expectation that without a cause, there's no effect. So practice eventually leads to enlightenment. There's a cause and effect. Enlightenment isn't created by practice, as I said. Enlightenment is just seeing how things are. But we can't see clearly if we don't practice. We can't see the empty nature of things or the fact that there's no self within us if our mind is distracted and clouded by all kinds of emotion, clouded by all kinds of views, likes, dislikes, all kinds of scattered thinking. We can't see anything clearly in that kind of state. So the practice helps to calm and clarify all of these distracting and disturbing thoughts so that we can eventually have some clarity and eventually let go of this clinging to ourself and let go of this clinging to enlightenment. So there's no definite time that it will take for us to have insight to enlightenment. However, it still takes practice. And if we wait for enlightenment, if we're waiting for enlightenment, we're actually just causing ourselves more obstruction. We're causing ourselves and creating impatience, which leads to unhappiness. We're not going to be a happy practitioner if whenever we sit, we're waiting for enlightenment, or maybe we're just waiting for some concentration or unification. If there's any waiting, then actually we won't make much progress at all. We'll be in a rut. Well, we will literally be in a rut of a mental state. So what do we do? Well, as the Chan masters would say, just don't wait for enlightenment. Just practice. But don't practice with the idea that we're practicing for something later. We're not sitting there practicing because we're going to be happy in the future because we practice, or because we're going to be awakened in the future. We just practice being wakeful. We're not waiting for wakefulness. Another way to talk about enlightenment is the word wakefulness, which the word wakefulness, I think, can help us see that it is the practice. Wakefulness is not a state, it's just an ongoing awareness of ourselves. We're cultivating an ongoing awareness of the empty nature of ourselves. So when we sit, we're fully wakeful that we're sitting. So with the method of just sitting, or shikantaza, in the Chan tradition it's called silent illumination. How do we practice wakefulness without waiting for enlightenment? We just sit with full awareness that we're sitting. Fully aware that the body is there. Fully aware that there are all different kinds of feelings happening within the body. We don't have to focus on any particular feeling. We don't need to analyze the feelings. We don't need to think about them. We're fully aware of the presence of the body, the feelings of the body. We're also aware of the flow of thought, because thoughts are still happening. Even if we're not thinking, because of our habit of thinking, thoughts still arise, and we're just aware of it. We're aware of the thoughts arising, we're aware of the thoughts passing. And actually, if you can, in the moment of thoughts arising and thoughts passing, just have that very natural awareness of it. That's being in accord with the experience of emptiness. It may not be enlightenment to the empty nature of the self, but it's in accord with it, because we can see from moment to moment the thoughts coming and going, coming and going. There are thoughts, but there's no thinker. Right? Where's the thinker in the process of thoughts coming and going? Or feelings come and feelings go, whether they're pleasant or painful, but there's no feeler. There's no one who feels. Where is that person? There's just feeling. Feelings come and go, thoughts come and go. If we just have a simple, open awareness of that, we're in accord with emptiness. We're just being wakeful of experience as it arises and as it passes. As long as we don't add anything onto that, as long as we don't add the thought of, oh, I'm here sitting, or I am experiencing emptiness, or when is enlightenment going to happen? Is this emptiness yet? Well, he said it was like in accord with emptiness. So is it emptiness yet? Am I empty now? Or am I still here? Wait a second. I think I'm still here. We're usually adding commentary onto the simple experience of sitting. The practice of being wakeful is just sitting, just experiencing whatever arises, feeling, thought, sight, sound, smell, taste. All of the possible aspects of human experience happen. If we're simply aware of it, our mind is at ease. If we're simply aware of the coming and going of feelings and thought and all of our experience, we are free. We're free from craving to them. We're free from craving them. We're free from being averse to some of them. And we're free from being ignorant and thinking that they're real, thinking that they're attainable, thinking that they stay, thinking that I can get this good feeling, I want to keep this good feeling, or I want to get enlightened. By just being wakeful, we are free in that moment. So practice itself in this way is freedom. So if we can have this attitude, we can let go of waiting for enlightenment, and practice in this way will definitely be easier. It will feel easier. We'll feel light and at ease. So however long it takes to truly have an experience of the emptiness of the self, we don't know. But we won't really care at that point because we're just cultivating wakefulness. And that's good. That is the practice. That is both the practice and insight. Very naturally, at some point, thorough and true insight will occur.